So, Om Shanti, everyone, and good evening. As you just heard, that whole commentary from Anthony Strano was on peace, and Om Shanti is, of course, I am peace. My original religion, my original self is peace. It's not just a state of mind that is peaceful, but my whole original self is peaceful. And so I am today going to share with you various aspects of facing our fears. But I'd like to start with this whole thing very briefly, what it means to face. And face for us is a spiritual power. It is a power that is included in our 8 spiritual powers. And to face is one of those powers. So in order for me to understand how to face my fears, I first of all have got to have some kind of a context on what to face means. So for us to face what is inside of me, I need courage, I need confidence, and I need spiritual capacity. So courage, confidence, and spiritual capacity. So when I turn within, because to face means the Hindi word for that is required to face is to be introverted. And the Hindi word for introverted is to turn your face and look within. And so when I turn my face within, what it is I'm actually looking at from which to draw these 3 spiritual abilities or spiritual dynamics. That is courage, confidence, and capacity. So there's a saying that all human beings look into the mirror of your heart. So to face means I'm going to turn within and look into my heart. So courage, confidence, and capacity are qualities found in the spiritual heart of the soul. So the spiritual heart of the soul actually lives in the intellect. When we talk about the mind, we talk about the mind being a factory or being like a fan, a factory that is just producing thoughts, and a fan that is just circulating the same air. So that's what the mind is. But when we talk about the intellect, we're talking about divine insight. We're talking about the power to choose. We're talking about discernment. We're talking about decision making. We're talking about remembering. These are all qualities of the intellect. But funnily enough, one would think that the heart of the soul would be in the mind, but actually the heart of the soul lives in the intellect, because the intellect cannot function spiritually without the awakening of the love in the intellect. So when I turn within to face, I'm actually facing the spiritual heart of the soul, which is the love in my intellect. And that makes such a big difference in understanding what am I looking at when, before I face outward, I have to turn within spiritually, and I have to develop this power to face. Well, what am I really facing? And what I'm facing is the spiritual heart of the soul, which is the love in the intellect. So when I'm aware, or when I'm in the awareness of being a soul, or as we say here, the Brahma Kumaris would say, be soul conscious, it is only then that I can accept and I can access the spiritual heart of the soul. So I wanted us to hold this a little bit, and I wanted to take you into a little meditation of when on this power, the spiritual power to face. So when I turn within and look in my heart from a spiritual perspective, what it is I'm looking at. So join me in a couple of minutes of a reflection on this. And I want you to really do it. I want you to turn your face within. That means turn all your senses within and focus them on the mirror. Look into the mirror of your spiritual heart, which is a deeper thing than just the running of thoughts in your mind. So you're moving beyond the thoughts and you're looking at those feelings within you. So here we go in the quietness that we are in, and we're starting with after that peaceful meditation. Follow me as I speak out loud these words so that we can turn within and face our spiritual hearts. The heart loves silence and solitude. Sit quietly on the seat of the soul in the center of your forehead. Be aware of who you are. You are a living light. You are a soul whose intrinsic virtue, inherent virtue, is love. Visualize love flowing from the sacred space of the spiritual heart. In the solitude of this space, listen to the sound of silence. Hear the whispers of the heart. See the subtle rhythms of the heart. Smell the fragrance of pure love emanating from the heart. Let the feelings of eternal love touch the core of your heart. And from the core of your heart, taste the original flavor of true love. a love that is eternal, a love that is immortal, a love that is forgotten, a love that is now remembered. Thank you. So I wanted first for us to be set within this context that to face our fears, we need to start with a core strength that exists in everyone. And that core strength emerges out of the spiritual heart of the soul in the form of courage, confidence, and capacity. But let us now look at what is this spiritual heart? What is this spiritual heart all about? I need to understand that. So as I said earlier on, living in this beautiful ability of divine insight, which is in the soul, which is in the intellect, is Preet, and Preet is love. And I'm calling that love the spiritual heart. And it is from this love in the intellect that spiritual intelligence works. And this spiritual intelligence works as a faculty of enormous strength. And this enormous strength has this word, Shakti, which is not the kind of power in the world, the power to control, the power to manipulate, the power to exploit. But Shakti is a transformative power that comes from love, because only love can transform. There's no other power in the soul that can transform. So, but covering this love, why we're not able to trust ourselves to love in the deep way that we need to love ourselves and others in order to face our fears and to overcome the fears. It's because covering this love are layers of illusions that we have acquired over time. And these illusions that we have acquired over time, they manifest in our lives as fears, different forms of fears. So in order to come face to face with these layers of illusions that I'm carrying from acquired births, from birth after birth, let alone this birth that I'm in, I need to cultivate the power of the spiritual heart. I don't need to cultivate my mind. My mind would be helpful, but I need to cultivate this power that would emerge from my spiritual heart, not just a mental power, but a power of the spiritual heart. Because this is the only way to deal with my fears. At the level of what's causing the fear. Because if I just develop mental power, I'm dealing with the symptoms of the fear. But if I develop the spiritual heart, this love, this strength, this transformative power of love, this strength that is called Shakti, in the spiritual heart of the soul, what I'm able to do then is that I'm able to deal with causes and remove myself away from the symptoms. And I'll take you through a few examples of what I'm talking about. And so I don't end up living my life on the battlefield of my mind. If I use mental power, my mind becomes a battlefield and I'm battling with the symptoms of my fears because I don't have the power and strength to go to the causes of those fears. So, I borrowed this statement from someone and I'm using it here. And that is, fear is a disease of the heart and it's curable. But we have to acknowledge it as such. So why am I saying that fear is a disease of the heart and it is curable? It's because when we understand the spiritual heart of the soul, we are being told that originally the heart of the soul was filled with love and light and liberty and freedom. It was free. And so that's why one of those beautiful images that we see that is so beautiful is when they have the Valentine heart with the two wings flying. You know, that used to be a popular image in New York anyway, for a very long time. This heart, I love New York, and then it had the two wings. If I had wings, I'd fly. And so it's this heart. But what happened to us that actually became the reason for our fears is that as we moved along this path, this journey of our lives, we encountered experiences that may have been beyond our understanding or our ability to cope with what was happening to us at that time. So when we look back, when we start this process of facing our fears, what we tend to do is develop coping skills to deal with the fears. But those are like things that help me in the moment. But again, they're helping me to alleviate symptoms, the coping skills, but they're not helping me to remove the causes, because it's like what has happened to me is so like mysterious, but it took away something significant and left a fear within. It took away a core strength, and the vacuum remained within me as a fear. So for example, some of the things that happened to us on this journey of life is that parents or other significant people in our lives that we trusted may have done something to break our trust. And what the vacuum that was left within us is that we are afraid to trust again. Now that fear went and settled itself in the heart, that I am not able to trust again because someone that was significant in my life, whether it's my parents or someone else, broke that trust. And it left within me a fear of not being able to trust again. Or another end of the spectrum is that we may have experienced a natural calamity. We may experience something tremendous in our lives that we had no control over. And that left us with the fear of the aftermath, like people were left with hurricane, with Sandy, or we see people are left after an earthquake or the fires in California. You know, the aftermath of a natural calamity leaves us with a fear of, gosh, what is going to happen to me? What is life going to be like when things that I had my security in are suddenly no longer there? Or we may have experienced a financial loss, and then the insecurity of that financial loss, whether it's the crash of the economy, whether I went bankrupt, or whether something happened, and like in today's world with COVID, people are losing their jobs, there's unemployment, there is also, even those who have their jobs, there's a decrease in their paychecks because the hours are decreasing. And so it's leaving that insecurity, and the insecurity is the fear of poverty. How will I pay my bills? How, that kind of fear. How will I provide for myself and for the ones I love? And then again, the other kind of buildup of the fear is that we may have lost a near and dear one that left us in deep grief. And today, again, with deaths of the COVID, people are having to witness that on FaceTime. People are having to look at it on Zoom. People are having to look at it through a screen and watch their near and dear ones, and then have the fear, am I going to get that body to cremate, or are they going to seize the body and maybe not give it to me? Am I going to be able to honor the person who passed, who was so close to me, with the final death rituals, or the honor of giving them a good send-off. So that leaves a very deep grief in our hearts. Humanity's heart is broken, and it is broken because of the grief that is there. But that deep grief results in a fear, and the fear is of death, and the fear is of also myself falling into ill health. So these are some of the examples of how the fears, the situations and circumstances that occur within our journey of life that have left the impact on our hearts. And when something happens to us that is beyond our ability to cope in that moment, what happens to the heart is that the heart registers a very strong feeling from that fear. That fear goes into the heart, sits in the heart as a feeling, sits into the soul as a feeling, but a very strong feeling. And then what happens is that my thinking power, my thoughts, my mind begins to draw conclusions based on this feeling that I'm having. So the mind is now trying to work itself to make sense and meaning of this feeling that has just impacted my heart. And then what the mind does is the mind starts creating self-limiting beliefs inside of me about my confidence and my capacity and my courage. And so these three in particular begin to get limited by my telling myself, my thoughts starting to create these, trying to make sense and meaning of the feelings and telling me why this has happened to me. But what it's creating is self-limiting beliefs that is actually closing me in and taking away my capacity, is becoming smaller. So for instance, I would begin to have thoughts that become beliefs like, this world is not a safe place to be, or I am not lovable, or you never know what's going to happen in life to destabilize you at any moment. So these are some of the self-limiting beliefs that we have ingrained, the mind has ingrained through our thoughts in ourselves, based on those feelings that have been left by the different situations that created the fear in us. And when this happens, it becomes very traumatic. So it becomes traumatic to the body, and the mind keeps repeating it over and over and over again. So, they say that fear is in the soul, but trauma is in the body. Trauma lives in the cells of the body. So when you're dealing with fear, you have to deal with your whole being. You have to deal with your heart, with your mind, and with your body. It's the total well-being, but you must come from, the spiritual core strengths that are within you. So this trauma in the body and the repetition of the mind that ingrain these self-limiting beliefs into the soul, how does this happen? What happens as a result of that is that we create certain habits that become imprinted on our hearts. So every feeling that impacts the heart then becomes a habit of the heart. So the heart begins to develop these self-limiting habits. And the impacts, I'm calling them feeling forms that get impacted, these forms or the impacts that get left in us as feelings, there's a mixture of our memories, of our emotions, of our thoughts. And they're not just thoughts, but they're thoughts about those feelings that I have. And then that's why people say, you know, love is a pure feeling. Love is not an emotion. Well, love is both. Love is a pure feeling when I'm spiritually realized, but it is an emotion when it's connecting to the trauma within the cells of the body. And so the memories and the thoughts about the feelings and the emotions that are connected to the traumatic cells in the body, they create like a tangled web of subtle threads that seem to take our lives over. And, you know, it's like our lives take on a way of living on their own. It's like I'm out of control of my own life because I'm now being driven. My life is being driven by all these symptoms that are coming from the causes of fears, and I cannot deal with it. So then, of course, each time something happens to trigger a symptom, triggers the cause within me, the out of control reaction becomes bigger and bigger. It's triggered, and so it becomes like a bigger thing that I have to face in life. And then what I begin to feel is that my heart has become heavy. It's become encumbered. It has become full of burdens and bondages and barriers. And you know, I'm no longer able to be myself. I'm no longer light. I'm no longer happy. I'm no longer free. Something is going on within me. And of course, the mind is cooperating by creating more and more thought forms that are resulting in more and more limitations, self-limiting beliefs about myself. And it becomes like when the heart is so encumbered, it's like this, it becomes like a shadow over the heart that blocks the light of the heart. And these feeling forms can actually make us physically ill. So the trauma in the body, when the heart is encumbered by the shadows of the fears, the body begins to feel physically ill because the trauma is in the cells of the body. So I wanted having to set that scenario first from understanding the spiritual heart of the soul through the commentary that I've given. When I'm saying the power to face, you're looking within yourself to see what it is you have to look at, and you're looking in your heart. I explain to you what is happening in the heart when the feeling impacts the heart, and the mind works with that feeling to create self-limiting beliefs about yourself and about the world and about the situation and about relationships based on those fears that I gave examples of that you may have gone through in life. And of course, it's not limited to only those. You would have a whole list of what you went through. And then now what I want to do is to go into some examples to show the cause of the fear, the symptoms of that cause, then how do you face it, and then how do you work with your spiritual heart with it. So from a psychological perspective, they're saying that there are various broad areas when it comes to causes of the fear. And one cause of fear is the fear of poverty. And we call that in the worldly terms, the fear arising out of economic breakdown. The fear that I won't have enough in terms to provide for myself and for my people, my near and dear ones. And so if we look at the fear of poverty today, what we're seeing is due to the breakdown of the economic system, due to COVID virus. I mean, there's a lot of other factors that caused it. COVID happens to be the one that is an obvious one because people are losing their lives in droves, but they're also losing their jobs in droves. And the government and their employers are not able to provide for them, even though some employers, I know most employers are trying to do that, but still there is this the fear of poverty, the fear of where will this lead me? What will I do? So when that fear of poverty grips the soul, the cause is poverty. But what are the symptoms that would arise in my life from that cause of poverty? It manifests, the symptoms would manifest is I'm angry due to past, I'm angry. I could have done, I coulda, woulda, shoulda, save, I could have conserved, I could have done it. So I'm angry with certain things that happened in the past, certain situations that might be unfair to me. All of those are symptoms of the fear of poverty. Then there's doubt about the present, because I'm looking at the present and I'm not able to see a way out. So that fear of poverty creates a doubt in my present. So I'm living a life doubting every moment that it's not going to go right. And then the third is that I'm so anxious about my future. I can't even see the future because I have to deal with the present, and there is doubt about the present, and it's just building up an anxiety in me about the future. A future that I can't even see. And so I'm looking for the new normal, and what I'm seeing that's emerging every day as the new normal is a fire raging, riots based on racial discrimination, COVID-19. I'm seeing this as a new normal. And so that's driving a lot of anxiety in terms of symptoms. This also results in indecision. I begin to not be able, I'm just indecisive of what I want to do. Or opposite, I'm overcautious. I'm only looking at the negative side of life. I begin to procrastinate. And then from all of these, a depression steps in. And the first sign of a depression is procrastination. I begin to put things off because I'm always expecting the worst to happen. So now I know the cause, poverty. I know the symptoms as they are arising in my life. Now I'm looking for a spiritual response. And the spiritual response is that I have to now I have to face these things, not as the causes. Usually I always find a reason to find the cause on the outside. But the spiritual response of facing our fears is saying, move within yourself and find the cause inside of you. So the beautiful thing about a spiritual response to the symptoms leading to removing the cause is that I begin to explore the treasures within myself, because I no longer could find it outside, but I know I just cannot give up. So I want to recognize that there must be another way. And so I want now to live from the inside out. So when I turn to face myself, I'm not facing, the illusions within my heart. I'm not facing the bondages and the barriers that I carry within my heart, because I know they exist. But I'm looking for something that's deeper within me. And this is what we're turning within to explore the treasures within ourselves, so that we could emerge from within ourselves a richness of spirit. Now, when I move into myself to explore, it's like I'm scuba diving into the ocean, and I'm moving beyond, deeper and deeper from the waves of the ocean, because I know I'm going into the coral reef to discover the treasures that lie deep into the ocean. And that's why scuba divers love to dive, because what they see, the beauty they see when they hit certain bedrocks of the ocean is incredible. So it's the same kind of uplifting of spirit, that when I would dive deep within myself and look for my hidden treasures, there would be an incredible experience. And again, it's all a case of the heart. The heart doesn't go in with a plan that this is what I want to find. But when I'm dealing with exploring the core strengths of my spiritual heart, what's at the bedrock of a spiritual heart, I am allowing myself to be open to explore and to discover, and not to say, you know, I'm going like a bulldozer and I'm going into like a bull in a china shop, so I'm going to knock everything out and break it, all those illusions. I'm going to fight with them until I get to my hidden strengths. No, I'm exploring, I'm looking at them, I'm being the detached observer, and I'm exploring from the heart. Because I have a spiritual principle that I would start my exploration with, in moving beyond all the barriers, all those symptoms that are telling me that I am poor, that I can become affected by all the things that are going, because ultimately where the world is taking me to is to a life of poverty. But I say, no, there's a richness within me that I must discover. There's a richness that when I find it, it's going to give me that core strength and the spirit to have the confidence. It gives me the courage to have the confidence to choose something that would put me on an upward spiral. But that strength must come from within me. And so this slogan that I go into the exploration of exploring the strength within me to remove the cause of the fear is, whatever I focus my attention on, that's what I'll see and bring into being. And that's what I'll get more of. So in order to remove the cause of the fear of poverty, remember this spiritual principle. Whatever I focus on, my attention on, that's what I'll see and bring into being, and that's what I'll get more of. So if I see poverty, I will get more poverty. But if I see and focus my attention on wealth creation that is coming from the strengths inside of me, that's what I'll get more of. And that's what I'll bring into being in my life and into my world. Now, that's the spiritual response of getting rid of the fear of the poverty. So the spiritual heart is the source of loving kindness, and it's also the source of self-compassion and self-confidence. So in order to do this exploration, we need self-compassion. We need to look at ourselves as sources of our strength, and we need to have compassion for ourselves in order to do that. Because this self-compassion removes what is standing in the way, what is not allowing our spiritual capacity to grow. So the self-compassion would in and of itself remove whatever is standing in the way of my capacity to see my own inner strengths, my own inner, treasures. And so, but what self-compassion does, it's a beautiful thing to remove fears, because what it does, it gives us a capacity to recognize our vulnerabilities that are triggering our fears. So there is a vulnerability that's underpinning the fear that I'm carrying. And so maybe it's a doubt in my own capacity to recognize my own strengths. So once I can remove that vulnerability or that self-limiting belief about myself that I don't have inner strengths, then to have the self-compassion to explore my inner strengths would be there, and it would remove that vulnerability or that doubt that I don't have inner strengths, and I will begin to recognize them. And you know, self-compassion uplifts the soul with a very special kindness. I become kind to myself. In many instances, I try so hard to be kind to others that I forget to be kind to myself. And so this kindness uplifts me. And with the kindness, on the foundation of that kindness, I begin to create beautiful thoughts that will build a confidence within me. And the thoughts that would build the confidence based on kindness would gradually begin to remove the layers of illusions that I'm carrying, that I say to myself, I can be poor, or that I am poor, or that the economic system will make me into a poorer person. But no, I will conquer the fear of poverty by discovering the richness within myself. And by discovering that richness within myself, through my self-compassion, giving me the capacity to do so, I then develop the courage to have the confidence to live a life of my own creation, to see into being and to put my attention on that would generate a spiritual wealth that would allow me to live a life of honor. And so I may have less in terms of money, but I would live a better quality of life because I'm not worrying any longer. There is a kind of a confidence that emerges out of that courage within me when I discover those innate qualities, that I would find the symptoms going away. I would find my body cells relaxing. I would de-traumatize, I would get rid of the trauma that are living in the cells of my body. And I would begin to heal out of the ignorance of what poverty does to the soul when I am so overwhelmed by what's happening in the material world. And so that is one way. So the spiritual practice that I suggest for this is loving kindness. I sit with myself with a sense of loving kindness, because what loving kindness does, it removes the layers of the illusions of the self-limiting thoughts that I am poor. It releases the spiritual richness through the spiritual intelligence that comes from the heart. The heart frees itself from things that leaves the impact, the feelings within it. It tells the soul that this is what you are in a negative sense. And the heart begins to feel that, this is a genius of the heart, that look, soul, you have the capacity to turn your life around, to turn the situation around, and to see your world with different eyes. But the seeing of your world with different eyes is coming from seeing yourself with different eyes. I will share one other example of the cause of fear, and then I'll open it to some discussion. One of the second causes of fear that they say is, again, another broad stroke that we carry, is criticism. And most of us as human beings, the fear, that's the cause of the fear, is criticism. And this criticism feels like an inbuilt, acquired mechanism that creates these self-limiting opinions about our own capabilities and our own abilities. So if someone questions my capability or my ability or my specialty or anything that I see that I have as strength, it comes, the soul or the heart interprets it as a criticism, and I become very defensive. So the cause is the fear of criticism. So what are some of the symptoms that emerge out of that fear? It is, I'm afraid of both. It's a very interesting thing. When I have the fear of criticism as the cause, I'm afraid of success and I am afraid of failure. So I'm living in this duality of fluctuation because the cause is the fear of criticism. So I'm afraid of success and also I'm afraid of failure. I'm afraid of what people will say and I'm afraid of what they will not say. I have a nervousness. The symptoms is I'm nervous. Even when I get opportunities to do things, I become very nervous. Or I become overconfident and I just project myself. Fear of criticism, the cause is fear of criticism. there's timidity and lack of poise. So when I'm timid, my whole body language changes. You know, my shoulders droop, my eyes are lowered, I can't have eye-to-eye contact. I'm trying to smile, but there's a quivering to my smile. There's the inferiority, superiority complexes, and those are symptoms of the cause of the fear of criticism. An inability to self-advance. I am not able to progress. Every time I try to progress, there is something that brings me back and doesn't allow me to make the efforts or self-progress. Or, there could also be a tendency of being very miserly. There could be the tendency of having extravagance, over extravagance. There's a tendency of saying too little, or there's a tendency of exaggerating. And then, of course, what self-criticism leads to eventually on either side of the spectrum is mental and physical laziness or hyperactivity in what I do. So all of these symptoms are associated with the fear of criticism. And we would have never thought that these symptoms are connected to a cause within me that is the fear that I would be criticized. And so if I were to connect the symptoms back to this cause, then in facing what it is I have to face in my heart, is that I have to look with honesty into my heart. And this is where this beautiful saying, look into the mirror of your heart and free yourself from that illusion called the fear of criticism. Because it's a projection of your weakness. And your mind is telling you this is what will happen to you. So you're actually creating those thought forms from the feeling that has impacted you, that if, from some other experience that you may have, that if I do this, this is what is going to happen to me. So to protect myself, I must do it this way, or I must cower into myself and become the victim of it. And so the facing now with the spiritual heart is that I go into looking at my heart to remove the cause, which is called criticism, the fear of criticism, by understanding that there is a creative art of transformation within my heart. So my heart has the creative power of love, and the creative power of love is what transforms my heart, is what will take away this fear of criticism. And what it also takes away is the stress, because the fear of criticism creates stress. Whereas the fear of poverty may be creating trauma, the fear of criticism creates stress. And the transformative art of the love that exists within my heart allows me to change tensions and stress into something very beautiful, which is resilience. So the heart has that resilience to withstand, even if I perceive that I'm being criticized, the love in my heart has that creative art of being resilient to it. It has a bigger capacity. So when we start this journey of healing our hearts, one of the things that happens is that we don't necessarily, when we go in to heal the heart, our fear would expand itself then. It would start with knowing that the cause may be the fear of criticism, but to see what has happened within me, whether it's a lack of trust, whether it is, I'm not able to live up to the expectations of myself or to others, the doubts that are there. I dread to fear that pain that may be existing within me. But you know what I have found out in facing our fears is that we can face the fear of pain and hurt that are in our hearts in two ways. We can say that fear can be a transformative method when I combine it with the spiritual art of the heart, which requires me to love, to bring out the best in me. Or fear can bring me down on a downward spiral of blame and denial. And it could take me into parts of myself that are most wounded. And I prefer to live in denial, and I prefer to blame others for it than to look at what's going on. I don't have the courage to do it because I don't want to look at this wounded part within me. But then, if we look at it, this is where a spiritual path opens us up to the courage. So not to deny the fear, but to heal out of it by tapping into my innate strengths and my innate wisdom of the soul requires me to understand that there's a creativity inside of my spiritual heart that will help me to do that. Because the spiritual heart can see both darkness and light. The spiritual heart would not deceive you because it's seeing both. But it is what you're going toward it with. If you want to live in blame and denial, then the spiritual heart will shut down again. But if you want to release that pain and to heal out of it by recognizing that transformative power of love that lives within the heart, then the heart will show you both. You wouldn't do one in denial of the other, but you will see both your strengths and your weaknesses. Because the soul's ability to discern is a function of my intellect. And my intellect has that has that love. However, when the intellect operates on the basis of love, the heart opens up. I'm able to discern darkness from light. I'm able to conquer the fear of ignorance. I'm able to have the courage to see what is real. I'm able to touch the true love that makes me see falsehood from what is truth. And I'm able to see right from wrong, positive from negative. All these things is what the heart allows the intellect to do. And so that allows me to heal. It gives me a kind of a strength that is very beautiful. And so the spiritual practice that I usually recommend for this is dancing with your fears. Do not be afraid of the causes of your fears, because if you're afraid of the causes, the symptoms would conquer you. But if you start dancing with the causes, going into the depth of the soul through your meditative practice, through your exploration and your discovery, you're dancing with those causes because you know that the flip side to every cause, there's a strength. And you're discovering that strength and you're dancing yourself out of the cause of the fear. And so, there is a practice in which you go into discovering the true nature of your heart, of your soul, which is peace and which is nonviolence. And you will work yourself out of the cause of the fear of criticism through identifying, first of all, what it is you're most afraid of in terms of being criticized. Leave the symptoms alone, but what is it you really are afraid of in terms of having these symptoms as reactions to when you're criticized? And then that will show itself to you, and you will be able to acknowledge it. And in acknowledging it, you become free of it. Just by acknowledging it, just by seeing it, you become free from it. And then you feel that, you now have that courage to work it out of your system. Another thing about dancing with your fears is that you become very curious about it. And the curiosity allows you to become very creative and to become very courageous because you're no longer afraid of it. You're just curious about it and you want to discover more about it. And in that discovery, you free yourself. And then, of course, you draw on your confidence. And this confidence builds a certainty around you to overcome that fear. And then what is so beautiful, how do I know I'm overcoming fears, whether it's of poverty, whether it's of criticism, whether it's of ill health, whether it's of death or whatever? It's that my attitude begins to change towards myself and towards the situation I happen to be in. And so there's an openness that starts happening within me, and an openness that shows me that every situation in life is one that brings me a self-benevolent opportunity. So I'm facing my fear with insight of what it is. That fear, if I face it, is giving me the insight of what it is I need to do now. And once I know what it is to do now, then that brings out that zest of life from within me that results in a New Zealand enthusiasm. And then, of course, the whole cause of criticism dismantles itself. So, but that spiritual practice would require me to journal. So I first have to identify what is causing the fear of criticism. I have to acknowledge it. And in acknowledging it, I then have to create a kind of a process that I become curious about it. So it's leading me to understand, this curiosity is leading me to understand that every moment in life is an opportunity for me to do something that will bring benefit to myself, benefit to others, because I do have it within me to do that. So I'm dancing out of my fears, and it's a very beautiful journaling exercise to do. So I will stop there because there's another one that I thought would be helpful, but maybe we could do that as a part 2, and that is ill health or getting sick, which is a big fear today. But maybe we could leave that for another day. But these two in particular, the fear of poverty and the fear of being criticized, are two I know that are very personal to us right now, and it's what we're facing. And these spiritual practices would be very important to do. And one would be, to get rid of your poverty, the practice would be the loving kindness, the self-compassion to yourself. And for criticism, of course, it is this journaling with identifying, acknowledging, and being curious to dance yourself out of your fears. So I'll stop there, and I know that we're almost at 8 o'clock, but if there's any time, if you still have the time and you want to ask me questions, please do so.
Thank you, Mr. Gayatri. Yes, I think there's a brother who wants to ask you a question, but just before that, I want to make a comment that at least now we know where the fear goes and sits, or where the fear lies. That's in your heart. And when you know that the fear is in your heart, it's actually easy to work on, because otherwise, when you don't know where is the cause, then you cannot actually you cannot actually respond. And so now we know that the fear lies in the heart, and there are definitely ways to heal that fear. So yes, Brahma, you want to ask a question or a comment? Go ahead.
Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.
Om Shanti, Sister Gayatri. So I have one curiosity to know. I don't know if this is a proper question to ask for you. I have one curiosity. We usually hear, commonly hear, it is good to be God-fearing, right? God-fearing, so that we will refrain ourselves from committing sinful activities, to refrain ourselves from committing papa karma. It is good to be God-fearing. But it is, I think there is another thought also. there is no need to be God-fearing, and in our case, Shiva Baba, because he is our father, and father loves his children. So there is no need to be afraid of the God.
Yes, I mean, there is that saying that you should be God-fearing, and the result of that was people definitely became afraid of God, and as a result, got estranged from God because it was used as a weapon in a way to work on their guilt. So the symptom of that would be guilt. But the cause is what? The cause is, it's not that I'm afraid of God, but I'm afraid of my own actions. And because God doesn't punish me, you see, this is where exploring the cause is very important for the expression of the fear. So the fear, the symptom is guilt. The cause, the symptom is also I should be afraid of God. But the cause, when one goes into the cause, they would realize that the cause is that if I do something wrong, God will punish me for it. Well, that's not the cause. God will not punish me for an action that I have done wrong, but my own action will punish me for having done it. So there's a cause and an effect. There is a cause and a consequence. When I understand the causes of why I'm afraid, why are people telling me afraid, and I should be afraid of God, it is because they're drawing my attention to the cause and the consequence of my own actions. So that is what I have to explore, to face the fear. And I cannot face the fear of the cause unless I understand what it means. That that justice actually lies in Dharma. Justice lies in the principles underpinning my actions. And so I have to understand that, explore that, and do it with my heart, because my heart is where the truth lies. So my heart wouldn't tell me a lie. That's why I look into the mirror of your heart, oh man or woman, to see how many sinful actions you've done and how many charitable actions you've done. It doesn't say go look into the mirror of your mind. It says look into the mirror of your heart. And so when I look at that, I see the cause. It's not God-fearing, because God doesn't punish me for anything, but it is my own ignorance of understanding the law of actions and the underpinning dharma of my karma. And once I could understand the cause of that, then I will conquer the fear. Because I'm facing it, and I would say, you know what? I now have the courage to choose to do actions that wouldn't put me in bondage or wouldn't bring me consequences that I would have to live in fear of those consequences. And then, of course, you have to have a spiritual practice to help you do that. So for me, facing our fears has got these three levels, whether it's God-fearing, and then I wouldn't fear God, I would love God. Because God in my life is to help me conquer these illusions that I've been carrying that led me into the darkness of this cloud separating me from my light. And then when I go into my spiritual heart and really be honest, then the heart is showing me both the darkness and the light and say, look, come on, you have to do it this way. You have to understand that it's not God who's punishing you. It's the consequences of your action. To change your action, you remove the fear and all the symptoms that go with it. And the guilt, guilt is one of the main symptoms of that fear.
Thank you, sister. It is clear to me now.
Okay.
Thank you. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.